Sri Lanka. Population about 19 million, roughly 3/4 of the population Sinhalese, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Largest minority, the Tamils, represent about 1/6 of the population. I quote from Affirmative Action Around the World once again, since the middle of the 20th century, Sri Lanka has undergone a remarkable and catastrophic change in the relationship between its majority and minority populations. Explain.
Well, as of the time that Sri Lanka became an independent nation, at the on the late 40s,
yes,
people inside and outside of Sri Lanka were holding it up to the world as an example of harmony between majorities and minorities, and saying we can learn from Sri Lanka because it's so peaceful that people get along together. In the first half of the 20th century, there was not a single race riot between the Sinhalese and the Tamils. And there are many evidences of the amity between the two groups.
Do you have one? Is this a case where one group is substantially more prosperous than
the
the other?
Yes. Once again, the Tamils, who are the minority, are much more prosperous. And again, they're particularly good in things like science and math. And there are historical reasons for this, that in colonial times, the British and the Americans sent missionaries to Sri Lanka, Ceylon as it was called then. Mm-hmm. The British colonial officials gave the British missionaries the more posh assignments, and they sent the American missionaries up into the Jaffna Peninsula, which was a poorer area. But the Americans taught math and science more so than the British. And so ever since then, the Tamils have been much better at math and science than the Sinhalese. And at one time, again, you found a wholly disproportionate number of the engineers, scientists, and people like that in Sri Lanka were Tamils, while the majority was lagging way behind. And again, this went along. This didn't disrupt
no problem.
No problem until they became an independent nation, and until they began having elections. And one man, Solomon Bandaranaike, wanted to be prime minister, and so he pushed identity politics. And the irony is that, like so many people who push identity politics, he was not really part of this group that he was being so strident about. Bandaranaike he was not a Buddhist, he was a Christian. He didn't speak a word of Sinhalese. His godfather was the British colonial governor. He studied at either Oxford or Cambridge. But when he comes back, he now suddenly takes off Western clothes, puts on Buddhist robes, learns some words of Sinhalese, and now he becomes more Sinhalese than thou, and he pushes the idea that the Sinhalese ought to have all these preferences and quotas. And it's clear that it was only to get himself elected.
They were the majority after all.
That's right. And once he got elected, he lost interest in this stuff, and he's ready to work out some deal with the Tamils. But by this, he had worked people up so much with this identity stuff that now they turned on him and assassinated him. And since then, the subsequent leaders got the message clearly, and they began pushing extremism toward the Tamils. And eventually things got so bad because, you see, the Tamils really had a poor area, so education was their only real way up. Mm-hmm. And when they were shut out, not totally, but shut out to a great extent from the universities, they were desperate, and nothing would move the government, and eventually there was civil war. Mm. And in that civil war, this little country lost more people dead than the United States lost during the entire Vietnam War. Mm.
Sri Lanka, quoting you, represents a tragic mockery of the underlying assumption of being able to control the course of events, an assumption implicit in affirmative action policies around the world, yes. Close quote. That is to say, social engineers actually think they can engineer society.
They say it, and they think it, and they say it. Right. They just can't do it.
Now, but Tom, isn't that an assumption implicit in virtually all government policy? You educate the population because you think the nation, whatever nation is in question, will become more prosperous as a result. You build strong defenses because you think that's a way of preventing war. Oh, I mean, what is distinctive about the assumption in affirmative action?
I guess it's the belief that you can sort of micromanage the results, and you can't. When you educate the people, you don't say, now you go off there and become a chemist, and you go become a draftsman and so forth. You educate them, and then you turn them loose and let them sort themselves out. With affirmative action, you're prescribing actual end results, and that's where you've gone beyond what you're capable of doing.
I see. All right.